The start of NFL training camps is upon us, and every year I get a ton of questions from the nation regarding the PUP list and what it means and what it doesn't mean. So I've just decided this year I'm going to do a video explaining the PUP list, explaining the NFI list, and explaining the IR so that when you have a question regarding a player's status when they get put on one of these lists, you can come back to this video and I will explain it to you again. Now let's get into it, because I know what it's like to get notifications like these and think, oh my gosh, is this player actually going to miss 4 games? And let me just tell you, it's not time to panic yet. Let's get into it. Let's talk about these lists, what they mean for your fantasy team, and how you can use this knowledge to gain an edge this fantasy season. All right, first up, we're going to talk about the PUP list and the NFI list, what they are, what they mean, and why we're seeing a lot of players being designated to them right now. So the PUP list is pretty self-explanatory. PUP means physically unable to perform, and it's any player that's recovering from a football-related injury that can't fully participate in training camp or preseason football activities because of that injury. Now, players placed on the PUP list can participate in team activities, but they are not allowed to practice with the team until they are activated off of that list. Players on this list are also allowed to get paid their full base salary, and it will count towards their contract year. So a PUP list player is typically a player that is dealing with an NFL related injury that happened while they were already employed by the team. What about the NFI list? Now, the NFI list is a little bit different because it's a non-football injury list, which operates in the same way in terms of how players are designated and what they can and can't do. But the difference is that these injuries are occurring outside of NFL participation and NFL activities. So examples of this would be a player that has not signed an NFL contract that got hurt in college, a player that maybe gets hurt doing something in their free time like training, or somebody that gets in a car accident or falls down a cliff. All of these things are things that could happen to players outside of football, and NFL teams place them on the NFI list if they manage to have something that they can't participate in practice with when they have that injury. Now, there is a little bit of a difference between these two lists in terms of how they are getting paid. Now, players on the NFI list are not entitled to receive their base salary, but often negotiate a contracted rate with the team, so they will get paid something while they're practicing and participating in their rehab, but they are not guaranteed their salary. The player could also fail to accrue a season towards their contract if they don't return by the team's 6th game. So if they have an NFI related injury and they stay on that list outside of the 6-week period, they will miss an accrued season for the team. So it's possible that the player could have to play another season under that contract because of an injury that happened outside of the NFL. All right, so why are we seeing so many players being placed on these lists right now? The problem with these lists is that with the PUP, with the NFI, they must be designated before camp practices begin, and they are required to miss 4 games during the regular season if they're on these lists, with a caveat, and this is where the confusion comes in, okay? So players that are designated to return from the active PUP or NFI can do so at any time during the preseason, and if a player is activated to return during the preseason at all and practices with the team at all, no longer are they eligible to return back to the PUP or NFI list. Now, there's a difference though between what the players are being put on right now and the players that have to miss the 4 games to start the year. This is where the confusion comes in. Active PUP, active NFI players are allowed to return at any time. If they get transferred over to the reserve PUP or reserve NFI list, they are required to miss the 4 games. So until rosters have to start being cut down, we will not have any players designated to the PUP or NFI list that are guaranteed to miss games. So if you're seeing the headlines and you're like, oh my gosh, this player was designated onto the PUP 99% of the time, if you're seeing that, they're getting put on the active PUP or active NFI lists first. Teams don't have to put them on the reserve list until later, which means there's no guarantee that they're gonna miss games. This is commonly misrepresented in reporting because we see PUP, we see NFI, and we just automatically assume that they're gonna miss 4 games. That's not how it works. Now, I will say that they have to be placed on the active PUP or NFI lists to then be placed on the reserve list. So if a player comes into the preseason and practices at all, they can't be placed on those lists. So it's only for players coming into the league year with an injury that can end up missing 4 games by being on one of these lists. So we will see this often with players who had a major injury last year that are being eased in to NFL activities in the preseason. But again, the reserve PUP, the reserve NFI lists are the only ones that actually require players to miss the first 4 games of the season. And all of the players getting listed in the very beginning of camp and preseason are not guaranteed to miss 4 games. Do not panic about these headlines. So how are we going to use this information for our fantasy team? Well, the obvious answer here is we don't want you panicking based on these types of reports at this time during the preseason. We will help guide you here at the Fantasy Headliners on which players you need to be concerned at from an injury perspective. Don't let reports like this change where you feel about a player, especially not at the beginning of the preseason. Don't be panic selling or underdrafting players that end up on these lists because there's no guarantee that they will actually miss games come week 1. And that can be a huge advantage to you if you're playing with people that take these types of lists into account and really discount players because they don't understand the rules. All right, I'm going to take a couple minutes here and explain the IR rules because it's a question that I get a bunch during the season. What are they? How do they work? So everyone knows pretty well that when your player is placed on the IR during the season, they are required to miss a minimum of 4 games. The next 4 games after they're designated, they have to miss. But if a player is placed on IR prior to the 53-man roster cutdown date, this year it's August 29th, that player is not allowed to play at all this season. So if you see a player with an IR designation prior to the 53-man cutoff date, just know that that player will not be able to return during the NFL season. Now, some few things that you just need to know in terms of how the IR works. Teams can designate 8 players to return to the team off the IR list. That used to be 0, and then they changed it to 2, and then they changed it again to 8. So this is a lot less likely to occur now, but back when it was 2, it was a big deal because only 2 guys were allowed to come off the IR, and you had to pay attention to which teams had designated which players. Now, not so much of a big deal, but just know that a player can return off the IR a maximum of 2 times during the season. So if a player is placed on IR and returns, placed on IR and returns, that is the max amount of times they can return from IR. If they get placed on IR again, they're done for the year. Now, those 2 times also count towards the 8 players that are allowed to return both times. So they will count double for that 8-person limit. So a player that gets put on IR, comes back, put on IR again, comes back again, counts for 2 of the 8 spots that the team is allowed to have. And these are just a few of the rules that you need to know about for the IR. Obviously, we're going to keep you updated on which players get placed on IR during our injury update videos during the season, but just know that those are how the rules work, and you can use that knowledge heading into the NFL year. So there you have it, guys. All of the rules that you need to know about the PUP, NFI, and IR list to dominate your fantasy league. But if you're like me, you want to start drafting today, head on over to our friends at Underdog Fantasy. Use the code Headliners and make a $10 deposit, and you're going to get matched that $10 or up to $100 if you so choose. And you're going to get a bunch of stuff from the Fantasy Headliners because we love the people that love the people that love us. So if you want to help the Fantasy Headliners out, we're going to help you out. And we're going to send you a copy of the 2023 Fantasy Headliners Draft Guide for free if you make that $10 deposit. We're also going to let you play in 4 different best ball leagues with somebody from the Fantasy Headliners. If you want to try to steal some money from the doc, good luck. I'm just going to let you know I'm a great drafter and I love me some best ball leagues on Underdog Fantasy. And we're also going to give someone that does this one thing from Jake's office. Now, I've been to Jake's office, and let me tell you, that place is a treasure trove of memorabilia. Jake's collection in his office is unbelievable. Watch some more of our videos to see Jake's office, and you could potentially get the chance to take something from Jake's office, and you absolutely should. Now, I'm feeling a little generous. So if this video hits 1,000 likes, and I know that you guys are going to hit 1,000 likes, that's easy, but go ahead and hit that like button. Leave me a comment down below. Give me one player that you absolutely do not want hitting the IR this year for your fantasy teams, and I'm going to give away another copy of our 2023 draft guide. And if your name's up on the screen, congratulations, you won last week's draft guide. Hit us up at info@thefantasyheadliners.com to claim your guide. But that's it for now. The doc is out.